Good morning. I have a tough act to follow. Such an inspirational morning session. And in fact, even as she spoke, and I was taking copious notes on my phone, feeling quite guilty that I had it open, but I needed to capture that knowledge, it also made me reflect on what we need to reflect on, and that is change. So, to the subject, as you see, global trends and preparing for disruptions. I will draw quite heavily from research. I do read a lot, and particularly from the BCG, Boston Consulting Group report, where I'm a senior advisor, which talks about exactly this. What are these disruptions? And in fact, only recently, the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, compares AI, artificial intelligence, to the discovery of fire. And what he says is AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. And he goes on to say, it is more profound than electricity or fire. We have learned to harness fire for the benefits of humanity, but we had to overcome its downsides too. So we, all of you, are in an era where we have very dramatic change which none of us can predict. So the awareness, and I think it's really important to follow from where we left off in the last session, the awareness of self, the awareness of our own shortcomings, the awareness of what we don't know, and how we learn and continue to learn is what is going to carry us into the future. Because the change that is coming to us in everything we do, in the way we work, to everything that countries, in fact, evolve to, is going to be about disruption. So, on that note, what is this new model going to look like? And what are the main factors that might influence it? And I'd like to share with you what I think are two very important changes. One, which you already know and have been reflecting on yesterday as well, which is the growth of digital technology. So clearly, a big disruptor. And the second is the growing protectionism and country centrism. You see it today in terms of Trump economics, if you can even call it that. You see it in trade wars, and in fact, the evolution of countries now, which is going from globalization back to a very protectionist regime. And both these factors have implications for the development model of countries like us. Both these factors are going to influence the way the companies we work in or the companies we work for are organized. So, the first new wave of globalization, we are seeing growth in the adoption of new digital technologies, and collectively, all these digital spaces, let's just call it Industry 4.0, as in fact is said in the BCG report. Now, these technologies are leading to greater automation in manufacturing. You know that already. The growth of digital service offerings and the rise of platforms that are transforming the traditional way of doing business. So fundamentally, it's altering the cost economies of manufacturing and competitiveness. Because what we are seeing is that as much as 30% of labor cost savings are happening, and this means that we need less people to do the same job. And the fall in robotic costs is also resulting in faster adoption of these technologies. And this is not just in the developed countries, but also in countries like ours. So the flexibility of automated manufacturing is changing the way manufacturing is organized. So one of these changes, which is pretty evident even today, is that mass customization can happen at very little incremental cost, because we are therefore seeing the move from large-scale, labor-intensive facilities where the erosion of the advantage, and the erosion of advantage even for countries like ours, which were very prone to taking the advantage of labor intensity, is moving. And so the pools of labor we have, or in countries like Vietnam have, may no longer be an advantage in terms of labor-intensive manufacturing. And this change in economics of manufacturing, together with the rising total cost of operations due to significantly higher logistics, inventory, associated costs, will lead us to smaller plants that are closer to the market. So both technology and the change are driving us to mass customization and the fact that we have smaller plants closer to markets. And for example, and there are many such examples, but let me give you the example of Adidas, which recently announced that it was bringing back some of the production to Germany from China. And it was doing this because of advances in robotics, which made the move cost-effective. And the company is also planning to build smaller plants in its major markets over the medium term to reduce lengthy shipping times and ensure faster delivery to customers. So a huge change in the model of delivery, from large plants in China with low labor cost to very distributed manufacturing facilities. And it is likely that many multinationals are following suit in the future for new or replacement of capacity, building smaller, more flexible plants closer to markets as opposed to the large-scale facilities of yesteryears. And as more businesses find it cost-effective to have these distributed manufacturing networks, we will see lower physical movement of goods around the world, which is great for the green environment, less carbon footprint. But this will clearly drastically reduce the potential for country growth driven by the China strategy. And it would have to make us in India reflect on what that new strategy means for us. So that's one big change. And the second, we are seeing the shift in politics now dominating economic considerations with the growing protectionism across both developed and emerging markets. And governments are increasingly seeking more benefits in country, as should we, and such as value addition, rather than simply being content as a cog in the global supply chain. So we were one part of the global supply chain, but tomorrow it's going to be a different story if these protectionist barriers, as are coming up today, persist. And as a result of the clamor for more jobs, more growth in country, these manufacturing models of low-cost exports that provided cheaper goods across countries are likely to evolve to a more distributed manufacturing model as above. So both the trends, digitalization and protectionism, are going to lead us to a very different model of manufacturing for the future. And together, that shift of paradigm of growth and development means we have to begin to look at things differently in India. Now, this rise in digital technologies, while it's altering the growth and industry paradigm looking forward, clearly is also going to throw up opportunities of growth through services, growth through micro-entrepreneurs, and I will begin to share some of these thoughts with you because the trends, frankly, are already evident. So, on the one hand, the growth over the last 2 decades have been driven by capital investment. rather than labor addition. And this has resulted in an increase in the amount of capital available per worker. Hence, we saw productivity go up, not so much labor growth, and we call this really capital deepening in terms of the way industry grew. But as we study the years ahead, capital addition has been the backbone of growth in the past, yes, contributing to GDP. Labor contribution has been low to negligible over this period. But what does this mean for us going forward? So clearly, from construction of physical infrastructure and associated services or light manufacturing, which still remain important, two different models. So what are these different models as we go ahead? So while we look at this and we begin to look at the new set of opportunities, digital technologies can clearly lead to growth of service businesses, which tend to be labor intensive, and we need that for jobs. It's an advantage for India, and that can drive growth and job creation for us. So these digital technologies are shaping a new, let's just call it a platform ecosystem, whereby more micro entrepreneurs, we can get active participation in and drive growth, leading to more job creation. So what do these platforms create for us? Who and what are these micro entrepreneurs? And really, I'd call this the servitization and the platform ecosystem, which is the new paradigm. And this servitization is the new phase of globalization, where it results in greater integration across products, across services, in a service-driven growth. So let me give an example of this. An example of this is the growth of the Internet of Things, which, in fact, NASSCOM has projected will be a $15 billion opportunity by 2020, so 2 years from now in India. And it's spawning a huge new set of digital services, such as asset management services, preventive maintenance services, and many global companies are committed to building digital services. So in fact, General Electric, for example, has launched Predix, an industrial analytics platform, which improves asset performance and optimizes operations and is open source across manufacturers. So every company is looking to see how it can play in the Internet of Things. And these services are becoming growth and profit drivers for manufacturing companies. Industrial companies are capturing as much as 2 to 5 times greater value from these services as compared to manufactured products. And this servitization of business has a visible impact on the financial performance of companies. So the global export of services in general and digital services in particular has grown much faster than the export of manufactured goods since 2011. I mean, you all know in India, contribution of services to domestic consumption has doubled in the last 25 years and is likely to continue to increase as services begin to command a greater share of the household budget, that we demand more services required by us and are prepared to pay for them. And this will be true not only for digitally delivered services, but also physical services. Now, the newer platforms clearly propel micro-entrepreneurs. And we see this around us, right? After all, what is Uber or Ola providing? It's enabling drivers out there to use their time far more productively. Each driver is a micro-entrepreneur. So these platforms are changing the way a person becomes not a job seeker, but may even become a job giver, but is clearly an opportunity to be self-employed. And small has become viable. We always talked about large-scale industry economies of scale. The language today need not be about large scale anymore, because small becomes viable because of these platforms that become available to us. Now, before the emergence of this platform ecosystem, businesses needed to be at a certain scale. Now, the benefit provided by platforms is that they eliminate that. And by enabling a set of services that can be outsourced without large-scale investment becomes the change. So suddenly the importance to have many partners, many collaborations, to move on, to change, to drop partnerships, to change partnerships become important, because we have the ability to do these bolt-ons because the platform provides this opportunity to us. On-demand services. Clearly, the empowered micro-entrepreneur is able to participate to on-demand services because the platform provides this. And in fact, the statistics are quite interesting, because Uber now enlists over 250,000 drivers across India, many who may have been underemployed in the past, or maybe just had poor customer access, into a system which enables their time and their energy to be used more productively. And this self-employment is changing, therefore, the way we work, and is enabling us to become job creators and not just job seekers. So for each of you who's there assisting companies, assisting infrastructure establishment, the change is staring us in the face. And the way we now apply these principles of the platform economies, digitalization, micro-entrepreneurs are going to be very critical to the world of manufacturing, the world of business, the world of infrastructure. And these opportunities, as they happen, I think if we have to look at this as a paradigm which has three pillars. Firstly, that services will provide a strong opportunity for growth and job creation. And these services will include traditional services, because we still need to construct, we still need to transport and store, but there will be newer services such as natural infrastructure management and digital services. So how aware are we of those requirements? The second change, which I alluded to earlier, micro-entrepreneurs who no longer need to scale up in order to be competitive as a result of the opportunities provided by digital technologies and the platform ecosystem. And these individuals can now compete and thereby drive more direct service facilities. And the third, and therefore very critical aspect, is domestic demand, which will now become a critical driver of growth and job creation. So we are lucky. In India, domestic demand is huge, and it comprises a significant share of global consumption. For this market will then become critical going forward, as if you look at the protectionist barriers on the one hand and digital platforms on the other, we will have enough in country to drive this change, given the distribution of manufacturing itself. And the consumer need for services is likely to be a key driver of change and growth. It is important to know that this domestic consumption will be different. It will have an increasing propensity towards services as households get richer and data and communication get cheaper, resulting in lower cost service availability. So this perennial drive towards cost reduction will clearly remain. And this creates opportunities. So as services become a driver of growth and jobs, the businesses are going to have to create different operating models, moving towards the servitization, which caters to increased demand. So what would these services really look like? I would say first would be what we call the evolved services. That's construction, financial services. These obviously will continue to play an important role in growth and job creation, where physical infrastructure, especially roads, railroads, ports, airports, these have to continue to be part of the country's development. And there's a significant potential for continued growth there. The second area that opens up is under-penetrated services like healthcare, tourism, transport, storage, and education, which historically have existed. They're significant. They clearly drive growth and jobs. However, despite investments in these sectors, these growths have been challenged. So that's the under-penetrated service where the opportunity exists today to leapfrog using digital infrastructure. And the third, and this is a very important area, is emerging services. And this is what would be natural infrastructure management, green energy, waste management, water, sanitation, rural development services. These are so underpenetrated today. The awareness through activities of the Swachh Bharat mission is very high. It is a program which is the most lauded program of this government. Our expectations now have been built up to see a cleaner India. But the services that provide these are still extremely underpenetrated. And that's where there's going to be a higher demand. And in fact, it's a global mega trend, as you see in the whole renewable space, towards energy and urbanization, and the current state of service delivery in the rural sectors in our country as well. So big changes expected in this space as we go forward. So to give you an example of what that could look like, in fact, the International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that jobs in the solar industry grew 12 times as fast as overall job creation in the US. In an economy that is extremely carbon entrenched, you wouldn't think renewables had such a high growth story. And then if you juxtapose China's commitment to renewables and our own country's commitment, the opportunity is absolutely huge. Additionally, there are sectors like digital services, like content services, forward services in manufacturing, platform services, which are on the rise globally, and where India has a huge potential for growth given our current strength in IT and ITES. So these emerging services sectors require a strategic policy push, and we need to put in place the necessary conditions to understand what these changes are and to be able to provide for them. So to drive this growth, there are clearly challenges. Challenges of lack of infrastructure, gaps in skilling, low social security. How can you be a micro-entrepreneur but don't have a social security system to fall back on when you fail? So why do you aspire to a government job today? Because you have a social security system. It's the only social security system and guarantee that you get when you could be the micro-entrepreneur which the platform gives you. Underutilization of resources, ineffective last-mile delivery of services. All this needs to be overcome. And this is the ecosystem, the right enablers we have to develop so that we create an environment to be able to use what is our advantage as a country, as a people, for better growth and delivery in country and to be a player in the rest of the world. So creating that ecosystem is going to be key for us. So micro-entrepreneurs, clearly a key driver of growth going forward. Self-employment. So that's one big feature. Second, platforms in the form of marketplaces. We have the whole e-commerce area, as you well know, the Amazons and Flipkarts, the aggregators across sectors such as Uber in transport, the Airbnb, Oyo in accommodation, the Swiggies in food delivery, and many others using technology to bring together the various stakeholders in the system. And product and service providers, customers and partners, these platforms are providing a whole range of common services such as customer acquisition, payments, logistics, reducing the barriers such as sizable investment in creating supply chains to the growth of small enterprises. So the entry barriers become a lot easier, and therefore the growth of small enterprise. And that small is not so small. For example, delivery handles over 65,000 transactions a day across 180 cities and towns for 25,000 merchants and more than 800 e-commerce companies. So the result of that aggregation is huge, but it's been created by a lot of smaller players that have aggregated into the big. So these are some of the changes which we have to recognize. Just because they're happening in some sectors which we don't work in doesn't mean it won't hit us tomorrow. And it is this that is important for us to play in. And I will just give you one other example which gives one thought and reflection. Alibaba, the most influential e-commerce enterprise, I would say in the world, not just in China. It has enabled inclusive job creation for Chinese entrepreneurs, where hubs of economic activity have emerged right into rural locations, small towns, based on the production and distribution of goods which they have been able to provide. And this could be replicated globally if Jack Ma's proposal to build an electronic world trading platform can connect millions of customers to suppliers worldwide. So these platforms are an ecosystem which we have to understand, have to recognize, have to build into our factories, into our delivery models of tomorrow. So I would just, in terms of trends, add just one last element, and that is urbanization. If you look at the major economies in the world that are yet to urbanize, things continue to change very fast. And if you reflect on what is happening here in India, it's in fact at one level quite scary. Some estimates are suggesting that 30 Indians move from a rural to an urban area every minute. Every minute. And by 2050, India's urban population will double to 814 million from around the 410 million that it was in 2015. And in fact, that challenge is also our opportunity because our cities hold the key to future prosperity. Our 100 largest cities already account for 43% of our GDP. And whilst they accommodate just 16% of the population, and over the next 15 years, our cities will account for 75% of India's national income and will be the home to the majority of new jobs created. And in fact, some of the research from a report that I have in fact been part of called the New Climate Economy, it shows that smarter urban growth can be an economic opportunity for us, worth up to an additional 6% of our GDP. So looking at the path ahead, the urbanization that India is going to see, how can we create cities where people thrive, breathe, move safely and easily, and be productive? And this requires investment substantially and smartly in urban infrastructure at a scale we have never managed so far. So that again is a huge opportunity for us in India as we go forward, getting the right infrastructure. So let me now move to just to touch on what does this mean for us. If we look at the messaging, the earlier session, it is at the end of the day, we are the seed for that change. So how do we embrace this challenge and this change? We are a generation who are going to face this moving bus like no other generation has. How do we see this? So firstly, serving informed and empowered customers. Your customer, whether you are a doctor today or you are an employer or just buying something in a store, you are just better informed. The customer is better informed, and therefore the customer demands more. A second aspect, we need to create flexible and adaptive operating models. There is no one model that one big factory has to change. So to reach these more demanding customers, we need companies that build new kinds of operating models, such as asset-light models, experiment with unconventional sales and distribution channels, and leverage technology in new ways. So flexibility. The third would be drawing on non-traditional resources and partnerships. A lot more outsourcing. So when we manage a project, how do we manage it to be able to bolt on outsourced partnerships, to acquire and build these capabilities in order to drive growth? And in fact, through this kind of model of licensing, partnerships, whether it's with government or social sector organizations or suppliers, is all about collaboration. A fourth area is adopting a growth and innovative mindset. We have to recognize innovation. Indian companies will have to weave a commitment to growth in our corporate DNA by fostering awareness of consumer needs, changing consumer needs, investing through R&D, unlocking organizational structures and attitudes, and basically become much more hospitable to new solutions, new business models, new approaches. And lastly, we need to focus on accountability, integrity, and sustainability. Because as we align with this aspect of growth, we are accountable to many around us. And that culture has to be one which upholds sustainability and social impact as a core value, because the communities around us are going to become more demanding. The community that exists around our factory is going to become more demanding. So let me end by saying we, as individuals, as professionals, need to move towards biological thinking. What do I mean by biological thinking? We move away from mechanical thinking, a thinking which is controlling the known, what we are used to, by controlling the pieces deterministically, rather to the biological thinking where we influence the unknown by shaping and adapting to the context at the time. So perennially aware of what is happening around us so that the bus that's coming our way doesn't hit us. We need to understand the change. We need to educate ourselves and adjust to change. We need to recognize what we do not know. We need to keep learning. And I'll end with a favorite shlok of mine, which is Maha Stavira Sangarakshita. To know what we do not know is the beginning of wisdom. So thank you.